Don't knock 3 times. I didn't believe in legends. At least, I didn't believe in them until that night. It was the kind of evening that was heavy with the promise of something strange, something you can't quite grasp but feel in your bones. I was sitting at the worn oak table in my tiny apartment, the kind of place where you can hear the creaks and moans of the building, like it's holding secrets it's desperate to share. The lamp next to me flickered, casting jagged shadows on the walls, and the air felt thicker than usual, like the world outside had slowed down, holding its breath. I hadn't planned to stay up so late, but then my friend, Mia, had sent me this message. A simple text: "Have you heard about the 3 knocks?" I didn't know what she meant at first. She'd always been one for bizarre stories, so I figured it was another one of those late-night pranks. She sent me a link to a blog post, though, one that rattled something in my mind. It was an old urban legend, the kind that people whisper about when the lights go down and the world feels a little too quiet. The story was simple: if you knock 3 times on a mirror at midnight, you'll hear a knock back, but it won't come from anywhere near you. It'll come from the other side of the glass. I laughed it off, of course. Old stories, old superstitions, I typed back. But something about it lingered. The thought that I could prove it wrong, that I could defy it, it made my blood stir in a way I couldn't explain. I should have known better. That night, around 12:30, after a long stretch of silence, I found myself staring at the mirror above the sink in my bathroom. The dim light from the hallway barely illuminated my reflection, but the shadows in the corners of the room felt alive, creeping, just out of sight. I wasn't sure why I was doing it. Maybe it was a joke, maybe I was daring myself, maybe I needed to prove something to myself or to Mia. It didn't matter. The only thing that mattered now was the sound of the clock ticking, loud and insistent, as I took my first step toward the mirror. I raised my hand, feeling the pulse in my fingers, the weight of the room pressing down on me. Knock. The sound was almost too soft, but it was there, sharp and unsettling. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "Nothing," I whispered to myself. I took a deep breath, and before I could change my mind, I raised my hand again. Knock. The second one came harder, more deliberate. My heart thudded. The silence afterward seemed too thick, too pressing. The kind of silence you can almost feel on your skin. I was about to step back, to laugh at myself, but something held me there. My fingers twitched, trembling a little now. I looked into the mirror, seeing my face there, my reflection staring back at me. Then, I knocked a 3rd time. Knock. And that's when it happened. The silence that followed wasn't just the absence of sound. It felt different, wrong, almost. As if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something that didn't belong to fill the space. I stood frozen, my eyes fixed on the mirror. And then, the quietest sound echoed back at me, a soft tapping, so faint it could have been a trick of my mind. It came from the other side of the glass. My heart leapt in my chest, and I stepped back, my breath catching. No way, I blinked, rubbed my eyes. I wanted to laugh it off, to tell myself it was just my imagination. But then I saw it. My reflection didn't move. I could see my face, pale, wide-eyed, and the way the light shifted slightly on the glass. But my reflection? It didn't shift. It didn't flinch or react, as if frozen in time. And that's when it grinned. It wasn't me smiling. It was something else, something inhuman, something mocking. I stumbled back, my hands pressing against the cool tiles of the wall, my breath quick and shallow. I could feel the blood draining from my face, my fingers shaking, trying to hold on to reality. But the reflection just stayed there, smiling wider, its eyes glinting in a way I couldn't understand. I didn't know what to do. My mind screamed at me to run, to break the connection, but my legs wouldn't obey. The mirror felt like it was pulling me in, as if it had become an abyss, a void that wanted to consume me. I knew I should have turned away, walked out of the bathroom, but I couldn't. I stared at the reflection, my reflection that wasn't mine. It leaned in closer. Its smile deepened. And the knock came again, louder this time, just on the other side of the mirror. The room seemed to warp around me. My reflection didn't move. But I did. The reflection stayed where it was, its grin never faltering, never changing. But my body moved, my legs carried me back, inch by inch, away from the glass, as if something invisible were dragging me in reverse. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in that space between sanity and something darker, something colder. The knocking continued, rhythmic now, like the sound of something tapping its nails on the other side of the mirror. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it felt like it was reverberating inside my chest, like the knock was echoing through my bones. I looked at my reflection once more, forcing my eyes to meet its unblinking stare. The smile had widened even further, its edges curling in a way that shouldn't have been possible. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My mouth opened, but it was like the air had thickened around me, a wall of silence closing in. The reflection, it moved, just slightly, its head tilting as if watching me struggle, watching me tremble. And then, I heard the voice. It was soft at first, a whisper that grazed the edges of my mind, not quite there but almost. It wasn't coming from the mirror. It wasn't coming from the room. It was inside me, inside my thoughts, mingling with the fear. You shouldn't have done that. My breath caught. The voice was mine. I wanted to turn away. To escape. To leave the room and never come back. But I couldn't. The reflection, it was moving now, like it had a life of its own. The smile was gone, replaced by something darker, a shadow crossing the mirror. The face, my face, now looked older, its eyes deeper, darker. The edges of the reflection warped like smoke curling out of sight, as if the glass was no longer a barrier but something else. Knock, knock, knock. The rhythm was frantic now, the sound louder, urgent. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned, finally, slamming my palm against the bathroom door, willing it to open, desperate for escape. But when I looked back to the mirror, I froze. The reflection was no longer there. The glass was empty. I stood there, heart racing, breath shallow, waiting. Waiting for something. Anything. But the reflection didn't come back. The knock stopped. And I thought, just for a second, I might have imagined it. Maybe it had all been a nightmare, a figment of my overactive mind. I wanted to laugh, to scream, to punch the walls in frustration for letting myself believe in such nonsense. But then, as I stood there, alone in that quiet bathroom, I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. It was the reflection. It wasn't gone. It was behind me now. The glass was still in front of me, and yet, I could feel its presence in the room. I could feel it smiling at me from the shadows, watching me from a place I couldn't see but I knew was there. And as the clock ticked the seconds away, I realized something was wrong. I turned slowly, a dreadful weight settling in my stomach, the air so thick I could hardly breathe. There was no one there. But I knew. It was waiting. And when I looked back at the mirror, I knew it would be there again. Maybe it was already too late. The knock came again. One last time. But this time, it was coming from inside me. I stumbled back, my pulse pounding in my ears, my legs threatening to give way beneath me. The mirror's surface reflected my frantic movements, but it wasn't just me anymore. The figure behind me, in the dark, was still there, even though I couldn't see it. It was like the reflection had seeped out of the glass, wrapping itself around me, pressing against my skin, suffocating me. The knock, no, the bang, sounded again. It was louder now, so loud that it felt like it was coming from inside me. My chest tightened, and I clutched at my heart, my breath coming in shallow, panicked bursts. I turned around again, desperate to see if there was anyone, anything, in the room with me. But it was empty. Completely empty. Except for the mirror. Except for it. I stepped forward, trembling uncontrollably. The reflection stood there, unmoving, but now it was different. Its face was no longer just a warped version of mine. There was something else, something darker, something alive. It grinned wider, its eyes flickering with malice, and it reached its hand out. Not a movement I made, it reached out towards me, its fingers stretching, slow and deliberate. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. It wasn't just my reflection anymore. It was me, but not me. It was alive. And it was waiting. Waiting for me to make the next move. I didn't dare to look away. But I couldn't look any longer. The reflection wasn't just mocking me anymore, it was taunting me. A deep, gut-wrenching fear crawled up from my stomach and spread through my veins, like poison. I knew, deep in my gut, that if I looked away now, if I blinked, it would be gone. But not just gone. It would be here. The air grew colder, the darkness in the room thickening, wrapping around me like chains. I heard the knock again, softer this time. But it wasn't coming from the mirror. It was coming from inside my head. You shouldn't have done that. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout, to run, to throw myself out of the room and never come back. But the words, those words. They weren't just words. They were truth. And I understood them. I understood what I'd done. I'd let it in. And now it was mine. In a last desperate attempt, I closed my eyes, clenching them shut as tightly as I could. The knocks didn't stop. The sound echoed in my skull, louder, harder, more frantic. The reflection behind me, the thing that wasn't me, was still reaching, still pressing against the glass, its smile stretched unnaturally wide. When I opened my eyes again, the room was still. Too still. There was no reflection anymore. I didn't move. I couldn't. But then I heard it. A soft, gentle whisper, barely audible at first, but it grew louder, clearer, like it was coming from everywhere. Inside me. Outside me. Everywhere. It's your turn now. And then, just as suddenly as it had all begun, everything went silent. I didn't dare to look into the mirror again. But the silence, it didn't last. The mirror was still there, just like it had always been. And somewhere, deep within the darkness of that glass, I could swear I saw it. The reflection. Grinning. Waiting. For me. I couldn't take it anymore. My heart was a wild drumbeat in my chest, and my breath came in quick, shallow gasps. I didn't trust my legs to hold me up anymore, but I couldn't stop myself from stumbling back, my gaze still fixed on the mirror. I felt the cool glass against my skin as I backed away, desperate for a distance I knew wouldn't help. It was still there. I heard it again, another knock, but this time, it wasn't just from the mirror. The knock came from inside my head, inside my bones, as if the glass had reached beyond its boundaries and was reverberating through me, shaking me to my core. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I opened my mouth, tried to beg for release, but I couldn't find the words. And then, in the silence that followed, I felt the weight of something else pressing down on me, that thing from the other side. It was like it was suffocating me, feeding off my fear, growing stronger with every passing second. The air around me felt thick, so dense I could barely breathe. I wanted to look away, wanted to escape, but I couldn't tear my eyes from the mirror. I was frozen, locked in place, as if the reflection had roots that had wrapped around my limbs, holding me to the spot. I knew it was only a matter of time before the thing on the other side would come through, before it would step out of the mirror and into the room with me. I had done something I shouldn't have. Something I could never undo. And now, I had no choice but to wait. Wait for it to claim me. Then, without warning, the mirror shimmered. For just a fraction of a second, it flickered, as if the very fabric of reality had bent, and then there it was, the reflection, not just a copy, not just a mockery, but alive. It stepped forward, its smile growing wider, its eyes gleaming with something that wasn't human, something dark and hungry. And then it spoke. Not out loud, but inside my head. Its voice was soft, almost soothing, but with a tone that made my skin crawl. "You've made a mistake, haven't you?" The voice was mine, but not mine. A twisted version of me, like an echo, a shadow of who I once was. It laughed then, a low, raspy chuckle that seemed to shake the very walls around me. You thought you could control this. You thought you could walk away. I could feel it now, the pressure against my chest, the sensation of being watched, of being consumed. It was in the mirror, but it was also in me. It was no longer separate, it was a part of me. It knew me. It knew everything about me, the things I'd hidden from everyone, the fears I'd buried deep inside. You're not getting out of this, it whispered, and I could feel it pressing against me, its presence wrapping around me like cold, damp fingers. I tried to look away again, but I couldn't. The reflection was there, standing just beyond the glass, its hand reaching out, closer, closer, until it was inside the mirror with me. It didn't need the glass anymore. My heart pounded. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then, it stepped forward, its hand inches from mine. The reflection in the mirror didn't just look like me anymore. It was me. It had my eyes, my face, my body. But it was twisted, warped, dark. It was everything I was afraid of becoming, everything I had never wanted to see in myself. And then it did something I couldn't process. It smiled, that wide, terrifying grin that stretched across its face, as if it knew everything about me, as if it had already won. I felt its fingers, cold and sharp, brush against my own. And in that instant, I knew the truth. The mirror hadn't just been a reflection. It was a doorway. A trap. I wasn't just trapped in the room with it. I was trapped in the mirror with it. The last thing I remember hearing was the soft click of the door to my room, closing. The reflection in the glass shifted one last time, and I saw it, me, standing there, grinning. Waiting. And then the knock came again, louder than ever. And this time, I didn't need to ask who was on the other side.